As per usual, second hour. If you want to go ahead and open up your work for this week, week 3, that'll make life a little bit easier for you. So let's talk about what we're doing this week. So today, as per usual, I'll go over what you can expect, including the week 3 slides, the checklist, schedules. I'll talk a little bit about the CTA vote, and then give you a lesson on colonial and puritanical lit. So in other words, the second part of Unit 1. The first part is natives, second part is Puritans. So you're going to see what these two very different people thought as they started out in America. I will also preview for you your week 3 work this week, including adding some answers from today's lesson. Then toward the end of the hour, you're going to get to pick this week which Puritan work you want to read. They're about the same as far as difficulty level and length. So your two choices will be Of Plymouth Plantation or Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And toward the end of the hour, I'll detail a little bit more about the two choices so you can decide which one you like best. So you're going to read that and then answer prompts on it. So for day 2, this is what I'll be covering. So since you folks don't have day 2 this week, you can either sign into the Google Meet during this time for day 2, or you can watch the video. So what I'll go over for day 2 is I'm going to review the week 2 work. I'm going to point out the green resources examples folder where you can get the answers. And then I'm going to prompt people to take quiz 1. Quiz 1 is already on Schoology for all of you. It's already been opened up. It's live, if you will. You can go ahead and submit answers whenever you're ready. Like I said last week, you get as many retakes as you need. It's due before the end of third quarter. I would do it this week while the info is still fresh, but it's due before the end of third quarter. And remember, quizzes are summative, so they're worth 60% of your grade. So that's this week. Same thing, just in checklist format. So this week you should have already gotten from me a message updating you on your grades so far. I like to do that fairly often so people know where they're at and so people have an easier way to ask for help if they need it. Pardon me. So here's this week's schedule. I'm going to have office hours today, Thursday and Friday like normal, 6 hour. Wednesday's a little bit different. I won't have office hours Wednesday for a very good reason. I get to go get my first vaccine. So that's good. I get to be with you sooner then. So that's Wednesday. As always, your work is due before midnight on Friday. Several of you are missing either the first assignment or the second or both. So get those in. All right. So Copeland True Life Adventures. I need to update this vote for you. It's now 6-2. So the plan is I will start these stories next week because that's our first full week, and I'll do it the second day of class. If these stories aren't your jam, that is okay. You are more than welcome, if this isn't your thing, to go ahead and open up Schoology when I tell these next week and get started on your work. All right, so at this point, I'm going to start the week 3 notes. I'm going to teach you about the Puritans, basically, which I'm nerdily excited about because I also took history in college, so some passions right here. You're going to get to add these notes, what I say, the answers, to your week 3 handout. So we're going to start with an image that Miss Fedora found from Pocahontas that pretty much sums up what happened to the natives when the colonials showed up. These white men are dangerous. Okay, so the colonial period is the earliest part of our history, and technically it isn't even our history. This is before we were Americans. So the writers that you're going to read this week did not consider themselves Americans because that wasn't a country yet. They were colonists of England. So the newly arrived colonists, they showed up just like all colonists do. They established villages and towns. They did have some trouble with disease when they first got to the colonies because the diseases they had encountered were different than the ones the natives had encountered. So there was quite a bit of death both ways for that. Notice on the slide here, it says enormous displacement of Native American civilizations. Very true. A lot of times, I don't know what your experience has been in history class, but the tendency in America does tend to be to exaggerate this period as kind of rosy. We hear quite a bit about the Thanksgiving story. It didn't happen. You hear quite a bit about that, but we don't hear about the truth. That is, the colonists had a creation story that made them believe that their job on Earth was to multiply and go to new lands and take over people that were not holy. That's their creation story. Whereas, as you know, many of the Native Americans had the creation story of the world on the turtle's back, all about balance, all about balancing good and bad in the world. So two very different mindsets, and that's part of the conflict that started our nation. So for Puritan literature, Puritans are a distinct group of colonists. They were very fundamentalist in their religion, and they really honestly believed that the reason why they were on this new land was to spread God's word and to basically subjugate the natives. So faith for a Puritan was not like a I go to church on Sunday thing. It was a daily devotion. They believed in original sin. That's another part of their creation story. So they really believe that everyone is born evil and needs to work hard to get into heaven and to be good. So they were a theocracy. That means a civil authority. That means basically the government is based in the church. I'll simplify it. They also believed that, unlike the Native Americans who believe that nature is our mother, essentially, and gives us balance, the Puritans believed that nature was an example of God's power. So we talked for creation myths, one of the main questions is, why do natural events happen? So why does it thunder? A Puritan would tell you that's God showing his power. He is angry. They also had a really strong work ethic. They believed in working hard. They believed that was how you showed your faith. And they really did not like any kind of luxury. So these are very simple fundamentalist people. Their writing style is very utilitarian, meaning practical. They were not big fiction writers, typically nonfiction, things that they thought would instruct others. That's what they wrote. They were not professional writers at this time. English as a written language was fairly new. So we don't have standardized spellings. Like one person will spell Plymouth one way with PLI, another person will spell it PLY, and both are equally fine because they're not professionals and there's no real standardized English yet. It's getting there at this point, but not quite. And a lot of times their writing was instructive. Like I said earlier, they wanted it to teach. So you're going to see a lot of sermons, personal stories about how the colonies are going, diaries, things like that for Puritan writers. They really believed in getting to the point. So you aren't going to see typically a lot of metaphors or things like that. Their imagery is very plain. So I said at the beginning, you have two choices on who you want to read about. So I'm going to tell you about the two authors today while explaining the reading choice. So you can make an informed choice on what do I want to read? And the readings are both digital and in your Schoology. So our first guy here is William Bradford, and he's an important person in colonial times. He helped start one of the main colonies. He also had kind of a dramatic life. When he first came to America, his wife drowned in the harbor. Like just bam, like they made it all the way across the ocean, that really perilous journey. She was sick as well, fought off the illness, and then drowned as soon as they got there. And that definitely impacted him. You can see it in some of his later writings that earlier he talked a little more emotionally after she passed. More, this happened, just straight to the point. So he was the governor of one of the colonies. He is also important. He's an important person in colonial times because he's one of the first people to write down what the colonists' experience was like. So the reading option for William Bradford is of Plymouth Plantation. This is a chronicle. That means it's a piece of writing that goes in order of time and just tells what happened. Kind of like a journal, but a little more formal. So if you choose William Bradford, you'd be reading about the experiences of the people who started the Plymouth Plantation. In other words, some of the first people to settle on what we now call America. So that's him. So if you want to read something that's more straight to the point and just describes what it's like to be a colonist, I would suggest a Plymouth Plantation for you. Now, if you, on the other hand, if you like writing that's very impassioned, like very strong in its opinion, Jonathan Edwards is your man. So let's tell you about him and the piece for him. So like a lot of our authors that we're going to be meeting in this class, he was a child prodigy. He entered Yale. It was called Royal College then, but he entered Yale at the age of 12. So I don't know about you, but I'm not smart enough to get into college at the age of 12. Dang, Jonathan Edwards, good on you. He became a Puritan minister. He really strongly believed in his faith. He was the kind of minister that really preached about hellfire and brimstone. Like, if you do this, you're going to hell. He was pretty harsh, actually. But the people at that time really enjoyed his sermons. He wrote and gave nearly 1,200 sermons. That's impressive. I don't think I've even given that many lessons. He was a part of the Great Awakening. So these were people that believed that congregations had gotten too loose. They weren't following the rules. So in other words, he's really a fundamentalist. He really believes God will punish you. If you're living a tough life, that's because God is punishing you. And if you don't behave, you're going to hell. So that's Edwards. Fun side note about Edwards. Not everyone at his time really agreed with his harshness. In fact, he got kicked out of his last congregation for that very reason. The people in his church, he wanted worshipers who had more money, and he thought they should be more picky about the membership guidelines. And they all voted, like, yeah, we are picky about the membership guidelines. You're out. We don't need you. He then became he worked as a missionary. So he was one of many colonial people who took it upon themselves to go and try to convert the Native Americans. That also did not work out well for him. They chased him out of every settlement. It amuses me. They chased him out of pretty much every settlement he tried to establish religion in. They weren't having it. Mostly his attitude. So that's Jonathan Edwards. He's famous because of the sermon that you possibly will read today, depending on what you pick. It's called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And really, it tells you everything you need to know by that title. So those are your two reading choices. And just to summarize, Puritans. Okay, some last thoughts on these people you're going to learn and read about. So their creation myth supports the ideas that God rewards hard work and harshly punishes sin. Their version of God is not a loving creator. It's kind of like an angry dad, right? They're a little ironic, the Puritans. They came to America, this land, for religious freedom. But as soon as they got here, they made sure no one else had religious freedom. They meant their religion. Fun fact, they also got kicked out of the Netherlands first. First, they got kicked out of England, and then they got kicked out of the Netherlands, basically for people thinking they were too harsh. Finally, every Puritan writing is going to reflect a strong faith. You'll see that this week and next week. Just about everything they write references God. So at this point, I want to show you, before I forget, here's your optional resources. Okay, and those are mostly from last week. So let's show you on the handout here how this could look. Let's get you started on some answers, and then I'll have you pick your reading and start. All right, so this week you have 5 points on analyzing colonial literature, essentially. And then you also have quiz 1 this week. So that's summative, and that's 16 points. That's why your rubric looks a little weird this week. All right, so first task. So this is going to be connections, reactions, or summarizing, showing your learning for the colonial literature part. So we can do this because we just learned about it. So what are 2 things that you wonder, 2 things you think about? You can take my answers here or mix and match, one from you, one from me. So to summarize, one of the things I learned is I learned the Puritans had very strong faith. So just 2 sentences to show your learning. Show your learning and thinking. I wonder if they kept their faith in the new land. So just like that for that. I'll keep that up for a moment so you can write that down. And then I'm going to set you for your task today. So in a moment here, you're going to start reading either Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation or Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And here's the kind of questions you're going to answer, because I'm asking them. So I'm going to preview these for you. What was the most difficult part about reading a work so far away in time from our English? Because that can be a difficulty for people. Did you use any reading strategies to approach the reading? So did you reread? Did you underline? Did you look up words to write your thoughts? So whatever it is, so first answer what I read. You can either put the last name of the writer or the whole title. So let's say I read of Plymouth Plantation. I could put Bradford, just like that. Then I can either discuss what's the most difficult part or strategies I tried. So you'll do that once you do the reading. So it could be I struggled with some of the words. I didn't recognize them, so I looked them up. Or there were parts I had to reread to make sure I was focusing correctly, whatever it is. Next, what are the Puritan or colonial attitudes toward nature or God in the writing? So again, not looking for full sentences here, just looking for enough to understand your thinking and learning. Then you're going to be asked, what are the Puritan or colonial attitudes toward human nature or survival in the writing? So what do they think is important to survive, or what do they think humans are like? So even without reading Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, for instance, I know by the title that this writer clearly thinks that humans are evil, and that's just their nature. They're sinners. They're born sinners. And then your final question for this week, aside from your quiz, is how are the Puritans and Native Americans alike and different? So for this one, you can either write out your answer, you could make 2 lists, or you can make a Venn diagram. That's where the circles overlap. Okay? However you want to answer that. All right, folks, so that is your work for this week. At this moment, I'm going to stop talking so you can start reading the work of your choice. If you have questions, as you know, I'm in the G Meet. Go for it.